Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Mr. Ian Teaches English. We are getting near the end of our verb series. Remember, English has 12 verb tenses, and we have already talked about 10 of those. We're talking about number 11 today, which is not very common, but still good to know, especially if you're an advanced student. You will definitely hear this verb tense. It is the past perfect continuous. So let's go ahead and jump in. Have your notebooks ready because we have examples and we have practice. Here we go. All right, the past perfect continuous. Don't forget, this is also called the past perfect progressive, but that's too many P's for me. All right, now let's go back and talk about all perfect tenses and all continuous tenses. Because if you understand the pattern that these have, you'll pretty much already understand the past perfect continuous. So remember that all perfect tenses, if the tense has perfect in the name, all of them use the verb have, and they all describe something that happens before something else. So the past perfect part of this is we're going to use the past of have, which is had, and it's going to be before a time in the past. Continuous tenses also have a pattern. Continuous tenses use be and then the base verb with ing. This tense does the same. Continuous tenses also describe things happening at the same time. So this also does that. An action that's happening at the same time as something else in the past. So this verb tense does both. It tells us something that happened before a time in the past and at the same time as something in the past. So what it does is it does both. Let's look at how it's formed. So here's the past perfect continuous in its form, what it looks like. Remember, we always use contractions, so the verb here is had, but it is pronounced d. If you want some extra help with those contractions, don't forget to check out my video. I go through all of the past tense contractions. I'll try to link it somewhere here so you can see it. But pause the screen if you need to. Affirmative, negative, and question form of this verb. All right, now how is it used? So remember, the past perfect continuous, the name shows us the pattern. The past perfect continuous is used to show an event that began in the past and continues to another point in the past. So this, like the past perfect, this happened before something in the past. And like the past continuous, it happens at the same time as something in the past. So put those two ideas together and you have something that began before a time in the past and continued up to that point in the past. These events are not true now. There's no connection to the present. These events were true in the past and took time. Continuous tenses show us that an action took time. It usually includes a duration or how long something happened, but not always. If there's context in the conversation, in the sentence, it might not do that. Here's an example for you. I've been watching TV for 5 hours before you came home. Now, two events here. Watch TV before you came home. But the past perfect continuous shows us that watching TV happened before, and the continuous part shows us at the same time. So you began watching TV 5 hours before they came home and continued to watch TV until they came home, at which time you probably turned it off or you answered this question. Now here are some examples, and we'll take our time with these. And if you have questions about these examples, please put those in the comments. I love to see comments and I love to answer questions. So if you do have some, please put those below. Number one, he'd been talking for 20 minutes before he ended the call. All right, so the past perfect continuous shows us something that happened before and continued until that point. So he started talking 20 minutes. He continued to talk for 20 minutes until that ending point, which is he ended the call. So both are true. It happened before and at the same time. Number two, we hadn't been studying until we failed the test. All right, so our point in time is we failed the test. Now before that, this is a negative, so it's an absence of the activity, but it's still true. They did not study before and continuing up to the time we failed the test. Number 3, they'd been working on the project until the deadline. So the deadline is our reference point in the past, and before that, they'd been working on it from the past continuing to this time of the deadline. Now here, we don't have an exact time of when they began, but it's probably in the context of the project because we do say the project, so whoever's talking understands when it began. Number 4, your mom's been cooking for 2 days before you arrived. Maybe you're coming home from university or you're coming home on holiday to go back and visit your country. And your mom started cooking 2 days before you arrived and continued to cook for 2 days until you arrived. All right. So both things are true, that she did it before and until the same time that you did it. Now notice here, nobody believes that your mom was continuously cooking in the kitchen, but she probably cooked and took breaks and did other things and probably slept at night. So it doesn't have to be an absolute continuous action that is nonstop. It can just be something that you're doing, like cooking here. Now, in the first example, he'd been talking for 20 minutes. That's probably an absolute continuous action, but it's not necessary. It can be something that happens a lot within a time. Number 5, the dogs hadn't been digging holes for a few weeks. All right. And number 6, this is the only question form I put in there because this really is not common in question form, but you can use it. How long had it been making that noise before you called me? So this question understands that in the past it made a noise, but it started before that and continued until a call. This reminds me of a question your mechanic might ask you. If you say, well, my car's making a weird noise, well, how long had it been making that noise before you called? Well, maybe for 3 days. It was making that noise for 3 days before I called you. So let's move on to the practice. All right, so let's do some practice here. Go ahead and pause the video, take your time, and try to put the correct verb tense in here. Remember that we're going to have 2 verb tenses in most of these. We're going to have the first event, which is going to be in the past perfect continuous, and then the second event, which is just going to be in the simple past. That is our time marker. So go ahead and pause the video. I'll give you the answers here in, well, I guess whatever you want. You're in control of the video. See you in a minute. All right, so let's look at number 1 here. Number 1, the movie'd been playing by the time we got there. Our marking event is we got there. What happened first? The movie had been playing before we got there. It started before, we don't know exactly when, but continued up until that point. Number 2, she'd been falling asleep before the explosion in the movie. Maybe the same film, I don't know. But she'd been falling asleep. She was in the process of falling asleep, and then boom, the explosion in the movie woke her up. All right. But before that, kind of this continuing process, falling asleep takes time. So we show that here. Number 3, before we took the test, we'd been studying for hours each day. All right. So have a look here. Notice we took the test. That is our past time marker. But what happened before that and continuing up to that point? We'd been studying for hours each day. And again, that's a good example there of not something that is continuously happening, but something that sort of repeated for hours each day. And number 4, when he applied for the job, he'd already been researching it. So when he applied for the job is that time marker, but before that and continuing up to that time, he was researching it. This idea that it started before and also continued is in both of those, or both of those ideas are in the verb tense. Why is this important? I always ask this question at the end of each of my videos. It's not really important. Sorry. Students love verb tenses, so I made a verb tense video, but This tense is pretty rare. It's not a necessary tense. Remember, I teach that there are 5 necessary verb tenses: the simple past, simple present, simple future, present continuous, and present perfect. You can talk about anything you want with those 5 verb tenses. So you don't need this one for production. You can use it for listening and understanding things in a lot of detail, but honestly, you probably won't even really hear that much. But you can check mark another verb tense off your list. And while you're here, if you have not looked at my other verb tense videos, this is verb tense number 11 in my opinion. Other teachers might have different orders to learn the verb tenses, but in my order, in my plan, this is verb tense number 11. We have one more verb tense left, the future perfect continuous. And if you haven't looked at my other videos already, go back and look at those. I talk about all the verb tenses in detail. Also, if you had questions about this, if this is not completely clear, let me know down in the comments. And also, give me a comment. Try your own sentence and see if it's good. My job is not only to teach, but also to correct. And so if you have something, a sentence that you want me to see if it's correct, I'm very happy to check it. So until next time, we'll see you.